concerned at how I am perceived as a public servant. Ibig sabihin, hindi po tayo nalalapitan. I appreciate the stories each person in that line tells me because each reflects a larger social problem that government needs to address through effective programs and policies. If they did not come, I would not know what to do. If they did not come, I would not know what kinds of policies to craft. There is the battered wife, the rape victim, the single mother, the informal settlers who have lost their homes to demolition, the father whose son abuses drugs, the family whose home was taken by a land grabber, the senior citizens who want free medicines, the college student who needs part-time work, the mother of a child with cerebral palsy seeking financial aid. The people go on and on, the problems are endless, but I am grateful to God that every day they are there in my office. But here is the interesting thing that has convinced me of God's presence in all things. For every person in the line with a problem to tell, there is someone in the same line with some kind of solution to offer, coming to me, seeking nothing in return except the opportunity to help others, to be men and women for others. Some of them are here today. Yes, there are heroes among us still, imagining a brighter future, refusing to sit back and passively wait for it to happen in some secluded room, but instead aspiring to shape and influence that future, desiring to live the magis. Before I end, I would like to say that some of the references here to St. Ignatius' teaching come from a book, and it's called The Jesuit Guide to Everything, A Spirituality for Real Life. And I mention that because I do not want to be accused of plagiarism. So thank you very much for listening, and mabuhay po ang Ateneo. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Belmonte. Thank you. So we have questions. There's a young man eager to ask. Did you raise your hand? Go, please.
I was very impressed with the things that you did, and many times I was just thinking, a devotion like that is must be a very strong devotion to be able to carry out these things, and I was just wondering if you have say. Something you tell yourself when you ask what you're doing it for, that really drives you. Say a quote or a mission that you tell yourself every time you ask yourself what you're doing for.
Thank you for your question. Well, whenever I'm asked that question, if I have a quote, it's a very cliched quote, but it is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I always use that quote because I feel extremely fortunate and extremely lucky to have been given the life that I have been given. And I always think that I don't deserve this life that God has given to me, and therefore there must have been a reason why I was chosen. No? And I feel that it is my duty, parang may utang ka eh. Feeling ko may utang ako sa Diyos kung hindi ko ibalik sa Kanya ang kagandahang loob na ipinakita niya sa akin. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Meron pang gustong magtanong? While people are thinking of their question, I have a question for you. Okay. No, it's not a philosophy question. Many people who work with government, the danger is always hopelessness, okay? Because there are just too many problems. What can the Ateneo do for you now that you're vice mayor? when the going gets tough, is there something the Ateneo can do for you?
Well, first and foremost, since the Ateneo is in Quezon City, I feel that it is also your duty and responsibility to help the city that is hosting you. So I'm thankful now that you have brought this up. And the Ateneo can help in many ways. No? For example, your graduates, and this is in a practical perspective, your students, they are very creative, they are social entrepreneurs, they study marketing, they study all kinds of courses, and I believe their skills, if we match them with communities that need these skills, can help these communities prosper. And one example I would like to probably point to is, for example, what happened to Reese Fernandez, the Rags to Riches example or experience, wherein she matched designers, she matched excited young social entrepreneurs with the communities with the skills to make certain products, and they were able to come out with beautiful items to sell abroad. No? I would like to tell you that in Quezon City, there are thousands of these communities, all with skills, all eager to earn a decent living, all just waiting for the opportunity to make their dreams happen. And if we can put these students in touch with them, that's very, very big help already. And a second way is through the training that the faculty members can help us with our teachers, and Lino knows that, as well as with our community leaders, who I think should also benefit from learning about governance, from learning about new technologies, from learning about new possibilities in their lives. And basically, in any aspect that you would like to help, there is a community for you to help. So all you have to do is get in touch with us, and let's sit down and plan what we can do together.
But how about Vice Mayor Belmonte? How can we help feed her spirituality so she can weather whatever tests that she has? What can the Ateneo do at this point?
For me, myself? Okay, well, first and foremost, your prayers are most appreciated. Your moral support for everything that we do. Your constant invitations to activities like this, which help us to remember that we have a higher calling, no? Because the things we do every day tend to be very mundane. And it's activities like this that help us to realize that we're really here for a higher reason, and it helps us to remember this. And communing with the Ateneo community also helps us to gain strength to continue with what we do. So, and if you would like to do something also for our employees, like conduct retreats or recollections, this would also be very helpful for us, no? Especially in the level of the rank and file, who I feel are all honest, who I feel are all hardworking, who I feel deserve better from all of us. No?
Esther?
I'm Esther Pacheco. I used to work with Ateneo, in fact, for nearly 3 decades. My question is, the residents of Quezon City have been given an added tax because Quezon City wants to build homes for the poor, homes for the informal settlers. I would like to know, and our people have been asking, what has happened to our tax? Have you built homes now? Have you begun? How far are we?
We have a tax called the socialized housing tax, and I know all of you were the ones burdened with this additional tax. So I thank you for that, no, for being supportive. Some of you were not so supportive, but at least you gave it a chance. And I'm happy to report that we raised over 100 million from that first year, no? And we have now 16 socialized housing program sites. They are called Bistecville, no? They were named Bistecville before the anti-Apple movement started. So now maybe they will be called something else. But we have 16 sites, and we have been building socialized housing for our people. So these sites are available for teachers, for workers, for government employees with low incomes, and for members of the informal sector. No? Now, they cost quite high. They're 2,000 to 2,500 a month. For payable in 25 years. No? And everybody here is welcome to have a look at these sites. We can organize a trip if you would like to have a look. The partners here are Habitat for Humanity, Gawad Kalinga, and FINMA. No? And some of the funds goes to a socialized housing trust fund so that we can help informal settlers who would like to relocate. Outside of Quezon City, we give them financial assistance also with the help of this fund so that they can relocate to an NHA housing property outside of Quezon City where they pay only 200 pesos a month. No? So, but rest assured that the funds are going to where they're intended to go.
We can take one more question. Yes, please.
It's actually a sharing. I'd like to address this to Vice Mayor Belmonte and to Attorney Tolentino of MMDA. I've been in socialized housing over the last 22 years, so I'd like to share a thought that because the informal sector, the informal settlers problem is a national problem, and government as a percentage to the total moving force is only a very small fraction versus the private sector. So if the government can only look into programs or policies that will motivate, encourage the private sector to take the cudgels instead of the government doing it themselves, then perhaps the problem of the informal settlers can be solved in a shorter time. There's an old Chinese saying that says, where the sweets are, so will the ants be. Kung nasaan yung matatamis, nandun ang mga langgam. And so if the government can focus on programs and policies that will make the businessmen, the private sector, realize that there are some social and some business profits addressing the informal settlers, then maybe they can do better job than the government because they are more focused in it. They have less problems outside of they'll focus on the informal squatters problem instead of addressing other social issues like drugs, like criminalities, and etc.
Okay.
So it's just a thought.
Thank you very much. You'd like to comment?
Yes, thank you very much for that suggestion. And sir, at the moment, we are exploring all possibilities that we can possibly work with. No? So if you have any specific proposals in that area, please let us know. But I would like to let the lady know who asked the question about the socialized housing tax that after 5 years, that will be returned to you, that tax. No? It will be returned to the people. So parang utang lang na ninyo sa amin yan para masimulan yung programa, tapos babalik din po sa inyo yung tax na yon.
So thank you very much, Vice Mayor Belmonte. So we now go to our next speaker, Justice Brion.
Thank you very much, Professor Angeles, my fellow panelists, fellow Athenians. Magandang hapon po sa kanilang lahat. Ako po ay lubos na nagpapasalamat sa inyong paanyaya dito sa pagtitipong ito. This is a first for me, the sharing of our Jesuit education experiences in order to take stock of how this education has molded and affected us, and to find out through these exchanges how our academic preparation is helping us participate in our share of nation building. These exchanges, to my mind, are very, very timely, for at no time in our national life than today have the upper levels of our public service been more exposed to Jesuit-based education and experiences. Our participation now in government is so pervasive. Nakikita ninyo from local government, from MMDA, an executive agency, we have an undersecretary, and there are many more. Our president is an Athenian. Our Chief Justice, this one and the past one, are Athenians. In the Supreme Court, there are 6 of us from this institution. Our participation now is so pervasive that I asked at the last Ateneo Law School graduation, where is the Ateneo and where are the Ateneans bringing this country? I think this is a very, very legitimate question to ask. And this, I think, is one of the answers, because here, through the exchanges, not only in this forum, but throughout the Ignatian festival, everyone will have an idea of where we are going in relation to the nation and in relation to where we have been as students. As I look back and try to relate my role in governance with my 8 years of formal education under the Jesuits, 4 years under the old Ateneo de San Pablo, and 4 years at the Ateneo Law School, what strikes me as significant is that my high school years may have had more impact than my law school years on my personal development and in what I do today. These early years constituted the foundation that shaped and directed my later years. The effect of legal training cannot, of course, be discounted, but it was more of a finishing phase geared to improve the product that was already there. They were years of strictly formal training for the profession, precise, specific, and focused towards making me a Christian lawyer. To me, an 11-year-old, fresh from public school, high school was a new experience that involved structured activities, rituals, and discipline. You will recall the morning assembly, the masses and prayers, the after-class activities, the intrams, the sociality, the ACIL, the Glee Club, the Sanctuary Society, the Drum and Bugle Corps, and the Dramatic Guild. These extracurriculars came one after the other, practically unceasing, yet not tiring, because these were part of play. There too, of course, were the jogs and the posts, the penalties we had in our day, which we had to suffer for our infractions. More exciting to me than all this were the academics and the world of books they opened up. I have always claimed that most of the English language I needed in my career, I mostly learned in high school under my Jesuit teachers. But it was not English itself that I enjoyed and found most exciting from my first week of freshman year. What immediately caught my attention was our prescribed textbook, the CEAP Book of Short Stories. I wonder if this is still being used. We used this 50 years ago, by Father John Delaney in collaboration with Father Horacio de la Costa, which I hungrily devoured within the first week of class. I found in this book a short story that I read and reread throughout high school, and whose lessons have stayed with me to this day. The story was Naughty Ned and Willing Walter, the tale of two properly brought up brothers who reacted differently to life and to the problems they faced. Walter was the smooth and urbane brother who was forever willing to please people he interacted with. Ned was the frank and naughty side of the pair, who spoke his mind and who expectedly did not do as well as his brother career-wise. In their final reckoning, Walter tried but failed to please God, who saw through his underlying unprincipled ways. Ned, the opposite, left it to God to judge him, and ultimately got the reward that he failed to secure in his earthly life. The story was my start into many things that I later came to learn more fully in theory and by experience. It was my first formal brush with the concept of principles and principled approach and how they can affect life and its outcomes. It planted the seeds for the kind of choices open to one in life. It strengthened my early interest in the legal profession that to date has not waned, as well as the thought of participating in governance. It was a very good first building block into the things I encountered in life. Closely parallel to the Ned and Walter lesson was the personal manner our Jesuit mentors dealt with us. We were not simply provincial warm bodies, but youths they cared for. Although their peculiar show of endearment was to call us all by our last names. I don't know if this is still the practice. These Jesuits were the first ones from outside our family who took keen interest in us and showed real concern, particularly in our personal development, expressed in talks that did not mince words when hard and biting ones were needed or called for. And I distinctly remember 2 occasions, and even the words used. In one that happened when I was in first year, my moderator accusingly told me, "You are the beadle, you are the president. Why can you not rise to the level of your responsibilities?" I understand those words to be a challenge to rise to excellence, a standard that at that early age was continually drilled into into our consciousness. In the other occasion, our class and I, as class president, refused to accept the results of the Christmas package drive because of what we thought were the unfair standards used. And we took back, open and close quote, most of the goods we contributed. The Ateneo perhaps saw our point and only suspended us from classes with special physical penalties, of course, and they stripped me too of my extracurricular roles instead of expelling us for theft. But more than all this, the Dean of Discipline individually dressed us down, and to use the mildest description of what he did, in the presence of our parents, we had a long talk, and I cannot forget what he said about hiya. The sense that he said should not leave us throughout life for our personal sakes and for our families' sakes. If nothing else, and the personal lessons from my Jesuit mentors had been the only lessons I got from my high school Jesuit education, then I would say I have had a full one, as these lessons have been both very meaningful and lasting. Life at the Ateneo Law School was vastly different, as it is a professional school. But as in high school, I distinctly recall the high points that served me well in my profession. Of all my subjects, I had a natural interest in my public law subjects, particularly constitutional law and political law, which I also taught for some time. I note that one of my students is here, Mr. Chito Sobrepeña. Although these subjects required the most reading, a good part of my partiality or bias was awakened by our professor, who had an insightful style that taught the student to always consider the law in all its shades, to look at both the letter and the spirit of the law, as well as its roots and the practical, ethical, and moral considerations surrounding it. For example, time and again in our study of due process, he stressed the fairness in substance and process that should always be there, because this concept underlies every law. The approaches to law that our teacher imparted, repeated many times in readings, recitations, and exams, it stuck to mind and were most useful when I began government work, particularly in the area of decision-making. I have time and again claimed that what I have written in my decisions, opinions, and dissents, as well as the approaches I used, I learned from these classes. To this day, my ultimate question before the release of any finished work, whether a decision, an opinion, or a dissent, and even in our own internal debates, is it fair? The ultimate test for all these years in school did not come from the bar examinations, nor in any other exam, but in the real world, a world that is as exacting and as unforgiving as that described by the most cynical writers and poets. It is a very complicated world compared to law school, as the lawyer or the public servant is burdened by the high ideals that society, the law profession, and even our alma mater have imposed on us. Complications arise as this same society, at the practical level, many times does not give premium to the high ideals it professes and that it has itself set. As a concrete example, it is a society whose members condemn graft and corruption to high heavens in their public speeches and writings, in their press pronouncements, and in their private statements. Yet, my friends, these same people look the other way when their own or their friends' interests are involved. Perhaps this is a cultural trait, as some are wont to claim, derived from our unique political history, our development as a people, our sense of community, our sense of pakikisama, and our warped sense of hiya. But I refuse to believe that we are culturally inclined to tolerate and commit graft and corruption. I believe that those in governance should be sensitive to the societal and cultural peculiarities so that they, particularly the Atenean who cannot claim any lack of religious and moral education should always look, check, and ask, am I looking the other way and allowing the cat to get away? I leave this question unanswered, as this is a question posed to every Athenian in the public service and cannot be answered by one Athenian alone. In terms of my own Ateneo experience, I ask myself always at least 3 questions. First, am I in my actions? And will I be in the final reckoning a naughty Ned or a willing Walter? Second, have I striven to achieve the highest level of excellence possible for me by doing my best? Or have I simply coasted along? Last, will my action be fair or is it nakakahiya? I close my sharing with these questions and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Justice Brion. The floor is now open for questions for Justice Brion. Perhaps I should start